And of course, as the book says, underlining all this is the bigger indicator of student success is parental involvement, and that has been established through research for decades. Parents who read to their children are more involved with their education. Those students tend to do better in school. And we have a kind of an overview of the diversity of the families in the United States and how diversity affects what students bring in with them to the classroom. Um, no longer do we have the Ozzie and Harriet, married family living in the suburbs, white picket fence, 2.3 children, etc. You have single parent families. You have remarried parents and families, families with adopted children, extended families. When I was a child, my grandfather lived with us, and that wasn't unusual back then. And then there was a period, I'd say, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, where you didn't see a whole lot of that. We're now getting back to that, and that's for a number of reasons. But you'll see a lot more students who are more day-to-day contact with grandparents, aunts and uncles. More single-parent families, of course. You'll have children who have mom has a boyfriend, dad's remarried, and they bring all these things in with them for good or bad. I'm not saying it's one thing or the other. I'm just saying that these are just realities we have to cope with as teachers. Um, Culture is a huge influence on our students. Aside from teaching, the public schools, and parents, the media culture particularly is a huge way we find identity, and it defines who we are. The movies we watch, the television shows we watch, the books we read, the internet sites we get on, the technology we have access to, computers, laptops, iPads, cell phones. Um, Cell phones have become the new sneakers, I say. When I was in high school in the late 70s, early 80s, uh, it was the hot thing to have the hottest new sneakers, like the Nike Jordan type thing, and kids would get steel sneakers, and it was always kind of a strange thing when you had families who don't have a lot of money, but their kids had $100 pair of sneakers. Cell phones that are the new version of that. It doesn't seem to matter what kind of socioeconomic background you have. Somehow parents find a way to get their kids really cool smartphones. Um, that is a market-driven economy. That's just the effects of it. Our culture is a reflection of our ideals and morals, which are very important too. So it's not all about just media and pop culture. It's our sense. It's where we get our sense of pride, love of country, etc. The values determine what is important in our lives, and for some people those are material things, and others it should be education. Uh, Schools have their own cultures that you will find out if you don't know already. Uh, Classroom behavior, what is determined acceptable as far as how you talk and what you wear. Schools develop a history. Growing up near Pittsburgh, I eventually moved on to live in the central part of Pennsylvania where I taught, and I was shocked when I saw the effects of the first prom that I was a witness to as a teacher. It was a bit of a culture shock how I see students who, again, this was not a rich school district I taught at. Girls would spend $500-$700 on gowns. It was like, um, I don't know. I think my wife spent less on her wedding gown than these kids were spending on prom gowns, and I just thought it was an amazing sense of the whole community would come out. And I haven't seen prom around here in South Dakota area, but the parents would come out. It'd be like a red carpet. They'd go and show up and watch the kids get out of the rented cars, limousines, big Hummers, things like that, and take pictures like it was like an all-star gala. Very, very weird culture. And sports rivalries, these things all figure into that culture, and these are things you're going to have to learn when you become a teacher, especially if you're in a district that you did not grow up near. There's a hidden curriculum that supports all this. Hidden curriculum can be good or bad. The hidden curriculum could be just the modeling behavior of a teacher who shows through their actions every day what it's like to be a professional and how you should treat people. Those are all good things about hidden curriculums. The bad sides of hidden curriculums, they tend to reinforce what is a dominant culture's view on life. Um, and this is where you get into issues with diversity and multiculturalism. In the old days, It was about toleration and adjusting people to become part of the dominant culture. Now we're trying to what we should be doing is recognizing the um, different benefits that people bring through diversity and recognize them. So they're not just ignored everywhere anymore. We're not use the phrase colorblind. We're not, treat all my students the same. They're all the same. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to recognize that difference is a good thing. And we talk about religious and moral sensitivities of students coming to school with what they bring with them, books that are banned. I don't know if I see that so much anymore. The days of Harry Potter books being banned. Um, and the interesting thing you can do is go to the American Library Association's webpage and see historically the types of books that have been banned. It's really fascinating how books like Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer will still rate higher than like the Anarchist Cookbook. It's just interesting what people see as what's important to them. Clashes of religious beliefs, prayer in school, and then I brought up things about the use of controversial issues in the classroom, and I recommended an article, and I'll have to check and see if I put that up on your website or not, on D2L by Diana Hess, who's a social studies professor at the University of Wisconsin. She's done a lot of research on the use of controversial topics in the classroom and how by and large, and again this is for secondary students, by and large, when the topic matter is somewhat controversial, and take that with a grain of salt. That's a broad category. It doesn't have to be over religion or evolution or creationism. It could be about bullying, and it could be about popular television shows. Anything, those things tend to allow students to open up more than they normally would. And her research shows that students involved with those kinds of discussions, class discussions that deal with a lot of controversy. And again, that word's loaded. It doesn't mean that students are yelling at each other. We're talking about an open discussion of ideas. They walk away from those lessons with a lot more than they do from just reading from a book. And by and large, that's what her research showed. So this is what I wanted you to tease apart and pull apart this idea but there are risks associated with using controversial topics. You can't offend students, you can't offend parents, you can't offend the community. But I think her work points out that there's a risk worth taking most of the time. Again, you might want to wait till you're a little more experienced as a teacher before you start really getting into that, because that helps. It solidifies you in the community, first of all. If you've been around for a while and you've got a reputation of being a great, fair teacher who cares about their students, you're more likely to get around an angry parent than you would be if you're new and just getting started. So that's an ongoing discussion, and you'll have to figure out for yourself. And we can talk about that more and more if people want to as the semester goes on. And the idea that your book gives you the components of successful school-family relationships. Getting parents involved is a big deal. Open communication with parents. Just see more and more online. Parents are able to get into schools online and find out grades, communicate with teachers, find out homework. Those are all good things. They come with a cost. It usually takes a little bit more work for you as a teacher to keep up on all those things and giving feedback. If you have, like I did, 135 students this semester, it's kind of hard to keep up on your emails when parents keep asking questions. By and large, what my experience has been, the parents we want to get more involved don't do so because of technology. So what I mean to say is, in my experience, if there are parents who you rarely see or rarely have communication with, the emailing and technology and online accounts for schools didn't change that a whole lot. The parents who were always involved are just as more involved with technology. But hopefully those things will change. The culture has to change. You just can't keep passing rules and forcing parents to come in and be involved. You have to change the culture. Our pop culture reinforces schools. School are for nerds. School isn't cool. I just saw a thing on MSN about T-shirts that Old Navy or somebody was putting out. Like it said, like, I'm allergic to algebra, and how these shirts are sexist, and we should be encouraging our daughters to wear these shirts. You girls should be smart at math. Another one was that somebody got flacked for was a shirt that said something like, I'm pretty so I don't have to do homework. People do it for me, or something like that. So again, the issue here is that's a symptom by and large of a culture that doesn't appreciate schooling. People would rather be Bart Simpson than Lisa Simpson, if you follow my logic there. And that is something we've been trying to change for decades, is trying to change that culture where school is a good place. We need to have school. That stuff's all in your book on page 115, by the way, as I wrote there. And then we have about the tensions. Again, bring up Diana Hess here. And then that's about it for this week's chapter. Chapter 4 next week is about schools as a workplace for students and teachers and the interactions that go on. So I'm going to close this out, and I want you to give me feedback on whether this format works best for you, much better than the Prezzies. I'd like to replace Prezzies with this. If I have to do both, I still can. But really, the Prezzies have just been a reinforcement of what has been in the book. All right? Thank you, and we'll talk.